Thursday night football here, and it actually seems like it should be a good game with Seahawks Niners on tap tonight. Looks like it should be a fun one, actually, based on the total as well. 26.3 implied points for the Niners, 22.8 for the Seahawks. Let's see if we can find the edges we always try to do here. Of course, I'm going to look at the projections and the ownership projections via Stochastic. We're going to optimize some lines with the solver, going to sim some stuff out. I'll try to hand build one. By the end of this video, you'll have 3 takeaways on how to build unique lineups for tonight's slate. So let's get into it. And again, this one, 26.3 implied points for the Niners, 22.8 for the Seahawks. So pretty loose total on this one. I would also say one thing that I realized when I was kind of going through the Monday Night Football slate, thinking through my takes, how I was viewing it, a little bit more. Of course, I talked in this video about how I thought the Saints could pull off the upset. Saints did not pull off the upset. Felt like they left a few plays on the field that would have been there. I do think where we are in this time of the year, it's important to kind of recalibrate a little bit, where we now have, 5 weeks of NFL data, 5 weeks of the market sharpening up to get used to what, is on the plate for this season. Important to keep that in mind here. We're in general for showdowns as the year gets on, as that data gets stronger. Important to play closer to the Vegas totals. That's what I'm going to try to remind myself today. A game where the Niners are about a field goal favorite on the road. We should be expecting a game that's competitive. Should be expecting one as well. We're a lot of touchdowns in this game. So there's the main things to take away from this one. Overall, in terms of the analytics as well, Seattle's defense on the year, despite giving up a lot of production against the Giants, or a lot more than it felt like they should. Negative 0.09 EPA per dropback by the Seahawks on the year allowed, negative 0.1 EPA per pass, negative 0.09 EPA against the rush in the red zone, negative 0.2 EPA versus run plays, negative 0.17 EPA versus pass plays. Point being, Seattle's defense actually has been relatively good on the year, despite the fact they did show some weaknesses in that last game against the Giants. So it's the main thing to take in mind overall relative to the defensive matches you're going to see today in the advanced analytics. On the Seattle side, the Niners D has been much softer this year, in particular against the run. Part of why Kenneth Walker's on the thumbnail today, which you might not recognize, by the way. He's gotten the full Adrian Peterson, shaved his head and all that. I don't love the look for him, to be honest, but hey, it is what it is. It's his choice. He's a good enough runner. He could choose his own hairstyles. Niners D on the year, though, 0.03 EPA per rush. They're giving up a positive number in the run game. So right away, that tells you a little bit more weakness there for a guy like Kenneth Walker, who gets really strong volume. Overall, getting about 17.7 intended touches a game, 2.7 of which inside the red zone. Walker should be able to produce fairly well if the game script goes along with it. You do have some team signal as well with them talking about not running the ball enough recently, not running the ball enough last game. Walker got there, well, I guess I wouldn't say got there, but got production last game by being on the field for third and long kind of plays, getting some pass game work. They do want to lean on the run more. Their pass rate over expectations has been really high. I would say too high, honestly, relative to how the team wants to play. A 7.7% pass rate over expectation in the red zone. They're also 2% over expectation as well. So the team's been passing a lot, and it seems like they want to recalibrate more towards the run. And in a game against the Niners, team that can blow them out, if they really start producing on offense, I would say running would be a little more of a priority for the team this week. So seeing the fact that it would be a game where the Niners, again, not defending the run well in the year, should be a situation where the Seahawks want to commit to the run. Obviously, if the Niners blow them out, they're not going to be able to do that. But if they get there early, and then Kenneth Walker gets there early, that's good production. Niners in the red zone, also shockingly bad. Just one thing to point out as well, where I think you're going to get Matthew Wright, the field goal kicker, in a lot of lineups tonight. I'm not sure that's going to be the right move for either kicker, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But for the Niners case in the red zone in particular, give up a lot of production in terms of EPA. Normally seeing positive EPAs in the red zone is a bit of a surprise for a good team. For the Niners, though, giving up a 0.06 EPA per rush in the red zone, 0.8 EPA per pass in the red zone. So if the Seahawks get in the red zone, they probably won't have to settle for field goals. So that's going to affect Jason Myers a little bit on their side. Let's get into it here. Let's look at the projections. Sort of my overarching view there, because I do want to talk more about the data, because I think the data is getting stronger as we go on here. A shout out to the chat as well. Yeah, stay safe, please. Power is out from the storm. Bored AF. I hope you guys are all okay out there. Hurricane Milton is the one right now, right? There's the other one that hit North Carolina. Tough for hurricane season. Tough for, I don't know, global warming, whatever. But hope you guys are all staying safe out there. And please do, if you're one of the people that's like staying it out and you're not supposed to be in your area, you're in an evacuation zone, please evacuate. Please don't fucking risk your health and your safety. But Geno Smith, our top projected player in the slate, which is shocking to see. I got to say, Geno's been passing a lot, as we talked about on this stream, a good amount overall. 0.75 EPA per rush, negative 0.05 EPA per pass, 45 dropbacks per game, though, is one of the higher marks in the league. Now, again, the Seahawks have talked enough times about wanting to run the ball more, being committed to the run. It's Brian Grubb at Washington was a guy that used the run to set up the pass, and he was talking about that this week in some of the coach speak quotes that were out there. I don't know if it's specifically coach speak index, but I did see some Ryan Grubb quotes floating around. Basically, was talking about he feels like their pass game is less effective right now because they're not running enough to set up the pass game the way they're supposed to. So for them, I think this Geno projection, he's going to drop back a lot in the game script where the Niners are ahead. But if there is one where the Niners aren't putting up a lot of points early on, let's say a lot of field goals going their way with the replacement for Jake Moody, that's something where maybe you don't see Geno get pressed in action quite as much. But I think there has been a lot of willful talk from the Seahawks camp about not wanting to pass quite as much. I don't think they want to be the outlier number one team in the league in terms of pass rate over expectation. So I think these projections are accounting for that fact, but not accounting for the fact that they want to maybe shift their approach a little bit more. So the Geno projection is really high. Is going to come up everywhere as a result with a $9,200 salary. But I think Geno's an okay play, but he's going to get like captain ownership here. And I think that's kind of tough to go to. Brock Purdy at number 2, 18.6 points for him. A little bit of a higher salary than Geno, so he's likely to come up from an optimizer more than Geno Smith. Or actually, he's going to come up less, rather. Excuse me, I said that backwards. Geno Smith's going to come up more in an optimizer than Brock Purdy because A, his projection's higher by about 1.5 points. B, he's $200 less in salary. So both QBs can make it into lineups if I had to guess when we look at the optimizer in a moment. For right now, though, I've guessed that Geno Smith's going to be in every single lineup, whereas Purdy might not be in every lineup. Mason, the salary, the highest on the slate at 10-2. Weird pricing on the slate, too, where it's kind of soft. It seems like it's pushing you towards jamming in the stars more. I feel like DK has kind of had a hard time establishing pricing in their slates for showdowns this year. But Jordan Mason, 10-2 here, a guy who we saw bust his chalk last week, still has one of the best roles in football, getting 22.6 and 10 touches a game, 5.6 of which are inside the red zone, 2.8 of which inside the 10-yard line. So Mason's role has been good. He just hasn't been punching in touchdowns. And also the team doesn't use him in the pass game, which is something that I've warned about, which now I think Roto World's reporting on. I've seen people tweeting about it more as a result. But basically, it's like he's being used like half Christian McCaffrey. The other half of the role, that pass game role, is not there for him. So still think he should be able to get there based upon the Vegas total, but I also think he's a decent play because he's failed now a couple times in the last few weeks. Still with Jordan Mason, high projection. Still a name people know. I still think he gets owned more often than not because of just how he's been playing, for the most part, been playing well. Kenneth Walker, number 4, 15.1 projection. So pretty big cliff between these top 3 and Kenneth Walker. If I had to guess then, I guess Geno, Purdy, and Mason going to be most likely to be the ones in every lineup. But Walker, a guy, you're getting direct leverage against Jordan Mason. Walker, similar command over his backfield in terms of the red zone work. 2.7 red zone touches a game, 1.3 inside the 10-yard line or attended touches is what I should say. The pass game work, though, getting there, he's up to 5.3 targets a game. I feel like he's got more of a Christian McCaffrey role than Jordan Mason does. So to me, Walker game script, I think independent can get there. The price tag of $9,800 is tough because all these guys are so affordable, but I think Walker to me would be a priority play on the slate, even though I think the projections have you a little bit off of that. DK Metcalf not too far behind, though full point behind Walker, as we're probably going to come in a little bit less than an optimizer at a $9K salary. Your top values overall, Ronnie Bell was barely getting any work. I wouldn't even play Juwan Jennings very much. Ronnie Bell to me not really a play. Same thing for Chris Conley. Same thing for Eric Saubert. I guess he can get maybe one touchdown, but he didn't even do that when Kittle was in the game. So I don't know how Saubert would get it now. Taylor, really not great plays here. And Geno, your number 5 overall value. So none of these $200 guys probably getting into many lineups. Saubert maybe getting into a few lineups, but none of them seem like the most viable plays as values to open up a bunch of money for you guys. Let's look at the ownership right now against Stochastic, 15% off all this data. If you just want the data, you can get that for 15% off. If you want the tools, the sims in particular, you can get that for 15% off as well. Some of the packages there are like $60 a month with 15% off on top of that. So check it out for yourself at Stochastic. See all the packages with the link in the description down below. And please do it because it does support the show. Buy a month, every month here. First 8 payments, basically they give me half of that revenue, so it helps support Splash Play directly. So please do that if you can. Link in the description with Stochastic. Geno, number 1, 67% up top here, 15% at captain. So you normally don't see the QB high on the captain. Normally that would mean you want to flip it, try to go with one of his pass catchers if you're going to play a Seahawks style build. It feels like, though, because the Niners are the favorites here, I feel like going to a Niners pass catcher at captain would be a little bit more appealing. We'll see their ownership in a minute, but 15% ownership for Geno at captain is a whole lot of ownership, and that is normally not a great play in a showdown to have that much captain ownership, even with the price tag being a little bit softer. Brock Purdy, 64% overall, projected 10% at captain, so pretty well represented at captain, will be less owned than Geno for sure, based on the projections we're seeing right now and the discrepancy in salary. But Brock Purdy, another viable play, especially if you're putting Purdy with multiple pass catchers in the flex. Jordan Mason at captain, 52% ownership overall, 12% at captain. If you were to play him at captain, I think it would be a play where you're probably more likely to take Geno Smith out. You could still have him in the flex as well, but I think a non-Geno Smith build with Mason at captain would probably look a little bit better. But Mason at captain means the Niners are ahead for most of the game. Mason's probably putting up good production as a result. The push-pull of it being the Seahawks are probably playing from behind, more pass downs overall. So you probably see more PPR points. I think you play multiple Seahawks pass catchers with Mason as captain, make that make sense. But Geno Smith's going to come up naturally in the optimizers and the projections and the sims and all that. Kenneth Walker, 42% overall, 7% in captain. Game script where Seattle dominates would be a Walker captain to me. I think it's an interesting one if you're putting in 150 or a 20 max. Your lineups that are representing an underdog upset here of the Seahawks winning at home. I think you want to put Walker captain a little bit more there. Metcalf also viable, obviously. JSN less so. Lockett even less so. All those guys playable, but Walker to me the most appealing captain, I think, in a build where you're expecting the Seahawks to win outright. And Brandon Ayuk, number 5 here, 41% ownership overall, 10.7% of captain. Functionally, he and Debo seem like the same plays here. Ayuk a little bit cheaper, Debo a little more expensive, Debo a little bit less ownership, but seemingly more at captain. So Debo's upside probably not reflected as much of the ownership as it normally would be. People love going to Debo, knowing he could put up 40 in a single game. After Ayuk just went off last week, having that push-pull of it being a game where Debo goes off, I think is not a crazy thing here. So him at captain at 11% feels a little bit light, honestly. Metcalf, not far off. Your low-round captains would be Kittle, Lockett, JSN. Juwan Jennings feels kind of flimsy. Kicker captains would be a little bit lighter today as well. Matthew Wright, $4,600 salary, kind of cheap given how much the Niners have used Jake Moody for field goals at all sorts of ranges. The expectation would be they're going to use Matthew Wright the same way. So, in fact, you're getting any sort of discount on him versus Jason Myers, I think makes Matthew Wright very likely to come up a good amount in an optimizer and a sim. We'll see that in a moment here. And your guys under 10% owned, Juszczyk, Kyle Juszczyk, Garendo, Jake Bobo. He can score a touchdown. Pharaoh Brown, AJ Barner, kind of the same plays here. Both guys not getting a ton of work. Barner we saw win, what was it, the 2-game slate a couple weeks ago? Barner getting 15 snaps a game as of last week. Pharaoh Brown got 8 snaps as of last week, while Noah Fant got up to 40. So Noah Fant kind of consolidated that role last week in a way he has not often. But Barner and Brown, 2 low-owned plays that could score a touchdown. It's basically them. Saubert, as I mentioned, I don't really see it. Ronnie Bell, don't really see it. Laviska Shenault. These guys are all pretty thin, under 10%. So I think the low-owned captain, Seahawks dominant approach, but without Geno Smith, I think are your ways to get low-owned based on what we're seeing so far. Let's go to the solver next. Of course, solver, a big part of our process as well. Using the optimizer, a key part of what you should be doing for showdowns, just to understand what the pure math is going to drive people to. The sims will give you a read about what people are going to play, but the math, the projections themselves, and how they come together will tell you what people get forced to more often than not without even realizing it. So that's where projections really are a key part in showdowns, and using this an optimizer just give you the straight math of it all. One of the most important things that, frankly, I probably don't do a good enough job pointing out to you guys. But your ETR projections right now, top projected players, Geno Smith for them as well. Brock Purdy, number 2. Jordan Mason, number 3. They do have Debo 4, so a little bit of a discrepancy from Stochastic. Kenneth Walker at 5. DK Metcalf at 6. Ownership-wise in the flex, they're expecting Brock Purdy to come in the most. Geno, number 2. Jordan Mason, number 3. Walker, number 4. And Brandon Ayuk, number 5. But not crazy concentrated ownership, it looks like, for any of this stuff. And it also does seem like ETR, which I would say is probably more accurate. ETR is Geno at 10% captain, which would be fairly high for a captain. Stochastic having at 15% feels a little bit aggressive, a little more projection forward. But your top lineup right now, again, no bells and whistles put on here, no boost given to anybody, just the pure cash lineup of it all. Geno Smith at captain, Jordan Mason, Brock Purdy, Debo Samuel, Juwan Jennings, and Zach Charbonnet. So Charbonnet making a cash game lineup. His workload with Walker back in is not nearly as good. Charbonnet last week, 21 snaps compared to Kenneth Walker's 39. So he's got something of a role. It's not as good as Walker's role is. But Charbonnet making a lot of these cash game lineups Seems like we're also going to see a lot of Niners dominant lineups. We'll look at that at the bottom here. All right, so 100% of lineups, which is pretty close to what I guessed. Geno Smith making every lineup. Brock Purdy making every lineup. So right away, you would say you want to get different from a lot of the field, don't play either QB. You want to get different from a portion of the field, play one of the QBs. But basically, right away, these guys project too well. They're too cheap. They're going to end up in every lineup as a result. It also does mean, too, if you're going to look at the flip side of it, the chalkier outcome, these guys are the best plays on the slate. So kind of one thing that I don't point out enough with the showdown videos is that talk a lot about, you see 100% of these guys coming up in 25 lineups with no boosts, and unencumbered crunch is what we would call it generally. An optimization, basically, where you're not adding anything on top of it. It's just what's the math's going to say or what the top projected lineups are. When you see these guys come up 100% of the time, I always talk about, hey, take these guys out of your lineup if you want to get low owned. It's one way to get unique right away. The flip side of it, though, would be that, like, basically when you see these guys come in every lineup, it means that Geno and Purdy are the best players on the slate. Now, you then think about how these guys not get there. So the equivalent would be on Monday Night Football. Alvin Kamara was one of those guys popping up at 100% of lineups, did make a winning lineup. How does he not get there? Well, the game script flowed away. They got behind early. They didn't really get into a spot where he could score touchdowns. That's the way that he failed. That's how he didn't make a lineup. So if you're going to go against these guys, you either play them or you go, hey, what's the logic to getting them out of my lineup? How do they not get there? So that means pass catchers making it. That means defense is making it. That would mean kickers scoring more than the QBs. That's the way these guys don't make it. So that's your way you're trying to build to get away from the most obvious outcome, which is that everybody's going to have Geno Smith and Brock Purdy crammed into lineups because they're too cheap for QBs, basically. Stack construction, you're getting dominant Seahawks 4-2 builds, only 8% of the time. For the Niners, you're getting 4-2s 36% of the time. You're getting 3-3s 56% of the time. So it doesn't feel like an onslaught slate, but anytime it doesn't feel like an onslaught slate is probably the time onslaughts have the best shot of winning. So let's say you play the Niners a little bit upset with their performance against the Cardinals, which they've talked about in quotes this week. They come out, boat race the Seahawks, who are not as good of a team as we thought based on what we saw last week versus the Giants. You play a 5-1 build for the Niners here, you're going to be pretty low owned as a result. The downside is that because the pricing is so flat, like, I mean, Tyler Lockett's at 5,400. So Tyler Lockett's basically the price tag of kickers in these last few slates. So you're playing kind of a tough outcome there. But if you can get to a 5-1 build and feel good about it, you're going to see some better stuff, I think, in terms of results. So showdowns, always being willing to play stuff that people aren't playing is a key part of it. But it does come down to your appetite for how much you can lose and all that. So most likely outcome, competitive, high-scoring game. You play a 5-1 dominant build for either side. You're going to be on an island today, and that's one way to win on a slate where the expected outcome doesn't occur. Let's go over to stochastic again. So we saw the solver part. Link in the description if you want to use the solver. Of course, they have sims as well, but for the sake of time, I'm going to try to just go to the stochastic side of the equation here. Let's pull this up. What we're going to do is build 10,000 lineups here. And of course, stochastic is going to have them compete 10,000 times against each other to find out what the best lineups are. So let's see that in a moment here. Shout out to the chat as well. Appreciate you guys being here with me. I've not been doing the chat as much today. Seahawks are injured as hell. Just gave up 150 to Tracy last week. Mason could go nutty. Again, the point, though, is that everybody's going to think that. So the tough part is, I always say about Showdown, it's not about the best plays. It's about the most unique lineups relative to the various outcomes. So I think in a game where, yes, Tyrone Tracy had a good game, where, frankly, I don't even think it was as good of a game as people think it was. But that's me being a little more of a game watcher of that one, and also not being that big on Tyrone Tracy. I think people were dying for anything to confirm their priors, when in reality, he looked basically as good as Eric Gray did throughout that game. But people are going to think then, oh, wow, Tyrone Tracy and Eric Gray to some extent beat up on the team last week. Jordan Mason's going to beat up on him this week. I think then you're just playing into what everybody thinks. So that is the push-pull of it all, basically how it goes. Which sims do I like better? They have different merits. The solver's merit's going to be that you can hand build stuff and optimize stuff around what you want to see your lineups looking like, and then sim it out. For stochastic, if you just want to get lineups in the last half hour before a showdown and make sure they have good data behind it, that's the value of stochastic's tool. So they're different things. But if you're going to sign up for one, I would recommend trying them out through the links in the description, especially for stochastic, to get 15% off with the promo code SPLASH on there. But I can't tell you which is better. It's personal preference. If you're a person that wants control, the solver. If you're a person that wants speed and just to get lineups in without a lot of work, I would say stochastic. But solver a little bit cheaper, so balance it out accordingly for yourself. Not seeing many 3RB lineups. Does that build bad or just because QBs are broken? 3RB lineups usually aren't good in general. You're trying to get consolidated production from. So no, it's not good, but also, like, who are you playing? You're going to play Charbonnet at this point? I mean, the solver seemed to like it enough as a projection play. I don't think it's actually a good play overall, though. Your top ROI lineups right now, according to Stochastic, as of 11:20 here on the East Coast. We got Kittle captain, Brock Purdy, Geno Smith, Jordan Mason, Matthew Wright, the replacement Niners kicker, and Tyler Lockett. So Matthew Wright making it in here. Matthew Wright also making it as a captain. Matthew Wright at captain, Brock Purdy, Deebo Samuel, Geno Smith, Jordan Mason, Tyler Lockett. So right away you're seeing Purdy and Geno. The Sims pushing you towards playing Purdy and Geno, even though getting away from them probably going to cut your ownership down a lot. Jordan Mason in this lineup where you see no Purdy. So Mason at captain makes the Sim think that Purdy is less viable in the flex. Mason captain, Ayuk, Geno, Jason Myers, JSN, and Matthew Wright. So both kickers in this lineup with an RB captain. Feels kind of hard for that to work out. You would basically have to have Niners on the Seahawks side of the field every drive because Mason would have to get enough touchdowns to make it his captain. And also Matthew Wright has to score 10 to 18 basically to make a lineup in the flex. Tough to see that many possessions. You need to be kicking a couple 50-yarders, I would guess. This can hit for sure. Anything can hit in a showdown, but trying to explain why this build I'm a little bit leery of because like RB captain means that RB is basically crushing, scoring 2 touchdowns, 100 yards, something like that. So hard for the kicker to get there in that kind of build normally, but the Sim thinks it works. Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, George Kittle, Jason Myers, Jordan Mason, and Matthew Wright. So 2 kickers in your 4th highest ROI lineup as well. And Geno, Purdy, Metcalf, Kittle, Matthew Wright, and Lockett. So that's your number 5 overall. Wright has not been that good. He hasn't kicked for the Niners yet, has he? Because didn't Moody get hurt last week? Matthew Wright. I mean, he's not good, but it's more the opportunity. Like he hasn't played this year. They gave Moody a lot of opportunity. My expectations are going to use Matthew Wright the same way, whether he comes through or not. I don't know. But I don't know. I think it's kickers are not a thing I study that much. So I'm not going to try to put my chest out too much on this one, but I think fundamentally kicker usage comes down to team usage. So if he sucks, then yeah, they're going to not like have him kick as many field goals from deep as Moody did, and maybe they'll go for it more in like 4th and 4 kind of situations. But if he hits those kicks, he's just going to keep hitting kicks. So I personally wouldn't hold his prior performance against him. It's the new situation with the team. Now they deploy their kickers. They deploy Moody pretty aggressively. So I personally wouldn't view it that way, but maybe. Let's look at the top 150 lineups here. Your top ROIs right now. Matthew Wright. Matthew Wright at captain. Stochastic Sims love Matthew Wright at captain. So right away, you want to get away from Stochastic Sims, go to Jason Myers, the leverage point against Matthew Wright. As I mentioned, though, the Niners are soft in the red zone, but it's possible maybe defensively, Niners are soft in the red zone. But maybe they don't even get to the red zone and you see more Jason Myers field goals. But with this much Matthew Wright coming up, Stochastic people tonight are going to have a shitload of Matthew Wright. So it's important to keep in mind. Matthew Wright in the flex, also 77% ROI, very high. They really think he's not going to be owned. So I guess that's the main thing here. They had him at 11% ownership? Yeah, they had Matthew Wright at 13% overall, 0.2% at captain. So clearly they think he's going to be under-owned. I think people are going to think like Steve, not to be mean to Steve, but I think Steve often has like the DraftKings general user kind of insights with these things. I feel like what they're going to do is look at Matthew Wright when they're putting in lineups today, look at his previous games, see that he hasn't had previous results this year. There's no game log results for him. They're not going to play him as much as they would a kicker maybe normally this year, where people know that kickers make lineups a lot this year. They're playing him a little bit more. But I think that the ownership probably won't be much higher than, I think the max he would get is 20%. So I could see why the ROI would be high. Got to remember, like, DK players, like, one thing that really stood with me a couple weeks ago, or stuck with me a couple weeks ago, was when Brandon Aubrey was on one of the slates, and I was like, man, like, he looks like a really good play, but he's going to pop up everywhere. Optimizers' projections weren't quite as crazy about him because he had a really high salary, and he still got jammed into shitloads of lineups on whatever slate that was for the Cowboys, because basically he had the last couple box score results were, 15 points, 20 points, 15 points. So if people see no results, I think they just don't go there quite as much. So that's basically it. Stuck in a $3 primetime Palooza and fucking Pete's in there. What an asshole. Well, hey, you know what? Can't win them all. I'm sure he's due to give you some EV back. Geno, top ROI player. Jordan Mason, slightly positive ROI. Everybody else in the negative. So the Matthew Wright part, you never see these kind of numbers in a showdown where this guy has this high of an ROI. But if the ownership is off, it's going to throw things off. So that's sort of the push-pull of everything as we always talk about. Overall exposures, Matthew Wright coming in 90% of lineups in the flex. Is he in 10% in captain as well? Matthew Wright in 96% of the top 150 lineups. That is a lot of Matthew Wright. In the San Fran onslaught, can Garendo get there tonight? I don't think so. Those are always the plays people try to ask me about, and they never hit. I would say more likely than not. Garendo played. They would have to score so many points for Garendo to get on the field and really make it matter. Played 9 snaps last week. Mason played 41. I wouldn't play Garendo personally, but it's a showdown. Anything can hit. Just that build that people expect, like, oh, the first team gets so much production and the backup RB comes in and he's also killing it. That like never happens. A kicker making a lineup like Matthew Wright happens a lot more often. Debo stuff seems so low and his price not bad at all. Yeah, that's it. It was no game logs this year. Historical kicking, how dare you? No, but I'm saying, though, that people look at the game logs and still go, oh, yeah, he hasn't kicked this year, and they don't see something right there. Whereas, again, for Brandon Aubrey, they saw, oh, constant 15-point games, so they're going to jam him in. I don't think they're going to jam in Matthew Wright, would be my guess. Even though projection players will jam in Matthew Wright a little bit more. Let's look at some lower-owned captains real fast, and I'll handle the lineup. We'll get out of here with our 3 takeaways. All right, captains. Let's look at Debo at captain. Debo with Purdy, Geno, Mason, Matthew Wright, Charbonnet. 50K. I don't know about that. Debo, basically 50K, you're going to get duped with that kind of lineup, I would think, more than once. Debo, Brock Purdy, Geno, Jordan Mason, Matthew Wright, Noah Fant. That's closer, but only $400 on the table using all credible players. I don't know if we're going to get too different with that. Debo, Purdy, Geno, Kenneth Walker, and Matthew Wright, Noah Fant. 49.2 on this one, leaving 800 on the table. Is Debo builds okay? I think you got to leave like 1,000 on the table with a Debo build because these ones are all, to me, like somebody would land on that fairly easily / obviously, I think. It doesn't seem like defense are coming up too much. It does not seem like defense are coming up too much now. Let's look at an IU captain. So again, you're playing the outcome here. Niners score a lot of points, but we're not playing it through Purdy. He's going to be the most projectable player. So an IU captain with Purdy, Geno, Jordan Mason, Matthew Wright, Noah Fant is your top ROI lineup. Ayuk with Purdy, Debo, Jordan Mason, Matthew Wright, Seahawks. Ayuk with Purdy, Geno, Walker, Matthew Wright, Noah Fant. Ayuk with Purdy, Geno, Juwan Jennings, Kenneth Walker, Matthew Wright. Holy cow. This is really a tough call, man, because like when a guy comes up this much in projections, it usually means like play something else. And we did this a couple of slates ago where one of the kickers projected really well. I forget what the situation was. There's too many showdown slates they blur together, so I apologize, especially the last few weeks and how they've been for me. Normally, you would just play the flip side of the kicker outcome. If the kicker is going to be underowned, I get why the Sims think that he should be in all these lineups, but it's pretty crazy. Really want to jam Purdy with Debo. You'd be good playing Debo without Purdy then, right? No, because Purdy's one of the top projected players on the slate. So theoretically, yeah, but if Debo makes it as captain, Purdy's also more likely to make it as well. So he should come along. Like the thing, if you're running boosts, let's say normally with an optimizer, you would give, if Debo's captain, you give like a 10% boost to the QB. With Purdy already being a top 2 projected player in the slate, you give him a 10% boost. He's going to make that lineup. So same principle for how it actually works in practice is that if Debo makes it as captain, he's probably scored enough that Purdy makes it. It's less likely than, I guess, if Ayuk's a captain, because if Ayuk got there, it's through all pass game production, where Debo could take some away in the run game. But I think Purdy's more likely to make it, basically. Was it the same Aubrey one? It was Aubrey, and then who was the other one that hit in that game? Whatever. But yeah, you flip the kicker in these situations normally in a projection thing. That's one way to get unique. So I would guess playing Jason Myers has a little bit more appeal overall, which, you know, it's tough because I do think the Niners give up production in the red zone, but doesn't mean they're going to, so that's fine. Kittle captain, we saw it being a top ROI lineup before. Your number 1 ROI lineup is this one with Kittle, Purdy, Geno, Mason, Matthew Wright, Lockett. We said that one already. Kittle, Purdy, Juwan Jennings, Jordan Mason, Walker, and Matthew Wright. Kittle, Purdy, Geno, Walker, Matthew Wright, Lockett. Kittle, Niners, Purdy, Mason, Walker, Matthew Wright. If you put another pass catcher in over Purdy, That's one way to make it a little bit better. And I can see why the projections wouldn't do that because Purdy projects too well. But let's say you take these Purdy lineups and you put Ayuk in over him, you put Debo in over him. You probably need Geno to make that lineup and create more pass catching value. But the pricing being so soft is going to make this a really tough slate, to be honest. Anyway, those are your top Kittle lineups. DK Metcalf lineup. So basically, you're playing an outcome here. I guess it could be one like Monday night where Rashid Shaheed got there, even though the offense didn't. I think more likely you're playing an outcome where the Seahawks win because one of the wide receivers does particularly well. If I were to guess one doing particularly well, it would be DK Metcalf. So Metcalf with Niners D, Geno Smith, George Kittle, Jordan Mason, Matthew Wright. So defense is getting in here a little bit, but I don't know if this is the kind of build where it makes the most sense. Would get your ownership down, so I guess that would be why. Metcalf, Ayuk, Purdy, Geno, Juwan Jennings, Matthew Wright. Metcalf, Debo, Geno, Jordan Mason, Matthew Wright, and Noah Fant. Metcalf, Geno, George Kittle, Myers, Walker, Wright. You're just not getting Myers alone a lot. You're either getting both kickers or you're getting Matthew Wright. You're not getting Myers alone. Anyway, there's your Metcalf lineups. JSN, Purdy, Geno, Kittle, Mason, Fant. JSN, Purdy, Geno, Myers, Jordan Mason, Matthew Wright. JSN, Geno, Jordan Mason, Kenneth Walker, Matthew Wright, Lockett. JSN, Metcalf, Geno, Jason Myers, Jordan Mason, Matthew Wright. This fucker, Matthew Wright, man. He is going to be the literal make or break of the slate. I think that's it. And the lowest owned win or way to spin a Seahawks win would be Tyler Lockett, I would think. Work's been coming down for him. He's definitely behind JSN and Metcalf in the rotation right now. But Lockett, Ayuk, Purdy, Geno, Mason, Matthew Wright. Lockett, Geno, JSN, Mason, Kenneth Walker, Matthew Wright. Lockett, Geno, these all feel very samesies. Lockett, Geno, Kittle, Mason, Kenneth Walker, Matthew Wright. Lockett, Purdy, Debo, Geno, Kenneth Walker, Matthew Wright. This is crazy. I feel like I'm reading the same thing over and over. Braden Willis promoted for practice squad. Niners 4 active tight ends tonight means they're going to run the ball 30 times, right? It's interesting to see that. Probably more 12. Probably not good for Juwan Jennings. I think would be the first thing because you're going to see a higher likelihood of 12, maybe 13 personnel. Running the ball more, yes. Potentially those guys like Eric Saubert in particular being more live for making a lineup with like one touchdown, I guess. But that does seem like, yeah, that seems like a tell for running more. Yeah, but it could just mean less usage for Jennings if I had to guess. Niners are going to want to run the ball because Kittle's still a little banged up. Just depends if Seattle can force him to throw. We'll see. I think they want to put up a lot of points in this game is really my guess because they're not happy about how the last game went. I think they're not happy about the season's going so far. I think they're going to put up a lot of points here personally, but we'll see. Slate tonight seems kind of tough. Probably just going to do single entry or 3 max personally. I feel like it's the kind of slate really where you would want to do 20 maxes more because there are so many guys in the same price point that have similar ranges of outcomes. That's sort of the main thing. Real fast, one last one to look at, and we're going to hand build and, of course, do our 3 takeaways. Jason Myers, captain. So we're getting so much Matthew Wright. We're going to instead say that the other kicker scores enough points to be a captain, which is not always how that works, but you want to get direct leverage. Like mathematically, that'd be one way to get the most direct leverage. So here's one with, all right, so the top ROI lineups both have Matthew Wright in it. Myers, Ayuk, Purdy, Mason, Kenneth Walker, Matthew Wright. Myers, Ayuk, Purdy, Geno, Mason, Matthew Wright. This one is interesting to me because we're getting the best parts of everything where we know Purdy and Geno are the top projected plays here. They're going to be in every lineup as we saw the solver optimization. We also know that Stochastic loves Matthew Wright. So this one to me, you're still leaving 7 to the table. You're getting less owned with Myers at captain. I think this build could work. Again, Mason here with Wright in the flex makes more sense because Mason just has to punch in 1 touchdown. You can get there just on PPR points, not score a touchdown. If you're going to play all the chalk, I think this is one way to play the chalk and still be unique. If you want to try and understand how I think Showdown Brain has to work. This one, though, with no Matthew Wright would also have appeal. Myers, Ayuk, Purdy, Metcalf, Geno, Tyler Lockett. Not sure you're getting direct leverage on Matthew Wright by not having Mason in this lineup, but at least you have a high ROI lineup without Wright. You're getting the direct leverage with the other kicker playing well at captain. That at least makes sense to me. This one has Wright in at number 4. Myers, Geno, Kittle, Mason, Walker, Matthew Wright. And number 5, Myers, Brock Purdy, Debo, Geno Smith, Kittle, JSN. This one I kind of like. Hard for me to not play either RB in this game, but I think people will play at least one of the RBs, and they should, because both RBs have dominant shares of the backfield. But this kind of build, you're fading the chalk. You're not playing either RB. You're going to take up a lot of ownership. You are playing the chalk QBs together, but there's a way for them both to hit. I think that can work. Let's do a hand build here. On a black screen, open it up. Single lineup simulator. Kittle's been banged up for weeks. I think he's fine. Kittle's always banged up. That's what he is. But he's had better usage this year than he's had in most years, to start the year at the very least. This is the main slate. All right, hand build this out. Okay, so usually if we don't feed back exactly what the sim wants to see, we're not going to get a good ROI. So that's the trade-off of this situation. What do we think happens here? Niners scoring a lot of points, I think, is one of them. I think they do it. Do they commit to Mason today? Like, and really give him the work after not giving him the best work the last few weeks? Sort of hard to expect that. I think it's Debo captain for me. Does feel like he's a bit of a forgotten man right now. The workload is still flat enough for him. He's still getting almost 4 rushes a game, 2.3 red zone touches. I can live with that. Brock Purdy is the Matthew Wright of CJ Beathard's. Interesting take. Thoughts on Barner? Not a lot. I said his snap share. He was under 10 snaps last week. He's a player that caught a touchdown a couple weeks ago. If you won money with that, great. I probably wouldn't keep doing it. But he and Farrell Brown, the same plays. Noah Fant's the more obvious play. All right, so Kittle's been getting good work here. If Debo gets more work, Kittle gets less. I feel like we have to put Matthew Wright in here just to have the fucking positive ROI. I think he gets there. I think Matthew Wright gets there. I think Matthew Wright gets there in the flex, and I think you play him at captain. Just too good of a projection for Matthew Wright, and the ownership, I think, is going to make it a necessary part to have a good ROI on the sim. So let's go with Matthew Wright. Let's go Jason Myers, too. People don't want to play 2 kickers. It's going to be the way we try to get unique here. We're going to play the chalk QBs. This feels like a build I might have already read out loud, but maybe not. All right, so we got Debo, Matthew Wright, Jason Myers, both QBs making it, which again is obviously chalky, but that's fine. We have so much salary left on the table now that we could play basically whoever we want. I feel like Ayuk, Kittle, that push-pull is a little bit tough. Would certainly prefer DK Metcalf, but we can't afford him. What if we take Geno out? Instead of Geno, we go to Metcalf. So we're fading one of the guys in every lineup. And that's how Myers gets in. Can we get to Walker? Cannot get to Walker. Can JSN or Lockett just PPR scam enough to get there? Or can Niners D do enough that maybe they make it over all these other players? Niners D would have to put up like 15 to get past all these guys. All right, let's see. Let's see what happens. So we're leaving 4,600 to the table. A lot of money to leave on the table in the slate. I know this is going to be the move. It's probably going to be a really negative ROI line if I had to guess. The issue is it's too easy to get all the skill position guys in. But on this particular slate, because it's so easy to get all the skill guys in, you're definitely not going to get a defense with it. But I think putting Niners D in is too much of a bridge too far. Put one more pass catcher in here. Let's just go the highest dollar guy. I think this would get duped, but let's see what it gives us ROI-wise. 49ers score a lot, speed up the game, force Seahawks to throw, get some sacks and turnovers. It's possible, but it doesn't look too good. Chalktober, Spags, never really Chalktober. I mean, it's always good Chalktober, but it's not always just play all the chalk. Negative 0.2% ROI on this one with Debo, Wright, Myers, Purdy, Metcalf, and Ayuk. It's actually not that bad because it wins 0.7% of the time. Top 10, 5%. This is actually not a bad lineup. I would play this one. But I bet if we drop Ayuk to Kittle, Maybe do a little bit better here. This might be enough to get into the positive. Because a few less dupes if I had to guess. No. Huh. All right. So you don't have to leave a lot of money on the table on the slate. At least it thinks. I think it's the kicker ownership fucking up, man. The Matthew Wright part, I don't know what ETR's numbers are because I don't think they put him out yet. But if Matthew Wright is higher owned, like for their official article and their content and all that, if Wright is 13%, he's a play you want a lot. If they're wrong about Wright's ownership and he's 25%, it's not very good. How about Bobo? He's okay. I don't. You don't have to play like the shittiest plays necessarily, but he's like they're the same plays. They're same like they have to score one touchdown and get in plays that are always on every showdown. So not usually the plays to focus on, especially on a slate like this one where the salary is a little bit flatter. But Bobo's the same. Like Bobo and Barner are not dissimilar. Bobo might play a little more snaps. That's basically it. Bobo played 2 snaps last week. You usually don't want to play guys who got 2 snaps last week, even in a showdown. All right. I don't think there's any way to salvage this lineup and get it much better. See if we put a Seahawk in, how that affects things. 2 Seahawks pass catchers without their QB. Maybe could have a better ROI. Negative 50%. Jesus. All right. Well, I guess that's it. I would say the one that in this configuration that had Ayuk would be the best one then. Debo, Wright, Myers, Purdy, Metcalf, Ayuk. I like that one the most out of these ones I've built that are off the beaten path a little bit more, but still trying to play a game where the Niners end up winning the game, score enough points, and get there. Fading both RBs a little bit tough on the slate. That's certainly one way to do it. It's basically that. I feel like the single game showdown or single game sim is tilted towards their data. I feel like it's less useful for showdown. That's fair. That's fair. All right. 3 takeaways to build unique lineups on the slate. Number 1 would be you have Purdy, you have Geno getting into every lineup because of the projection. So you take one of those guys out that helps you get away from the field. You take both those guys out, you get you away from more of the field. So I would honestly say, you know what, real fast, I think it's actually worth it as a quick little exercise. Lineup filters here. Let's look at lineups without both. Lineups do not contain. So if you wanted to fade or get away from chalk here, let me go back to the screen. Purdy lineup does not contain Geno. And again, keep it in mind because like these guys are in every lineup for a reason, but when you're trying to get away, get off the beaten path a little bit more for a showdown, it's kind of what you have to do. So lineup without both QBs would be Mason, Ayuk, Geno, Myers, JSN, and Matthew Wright. So both kickers, some pass catchers. Wait, oh no, I put in the wrong thing. Wait, what? Oh, and okay. That would be fading one of them. We fade both of them, you get this one. Mason, Niners, Ayuk, JSN, Walker, Matthew Wright. So you're getting both RBs in when you don't play the kickers and a defense. Defense actually come in a lot when you don't play both QBs, it looks like. Because you're getting Niners here. This one with Mason, Kittle, Myers, JSN, Walker, Matthew Wright. You're saying one pass catcher can get there along with the kickers and both RBs. That works for me. Leaving Niners on the table as well. I think this is one way to build tonight. Would just be take them both out, play whatever lineups you could do. That would be it. Shout out Justin here. Appreciate it. Best showdown show out there. Appreciate that. That's very kind words. A lot of great showdowns out there. Showdown videos out there. So go check them out after this one. But I appreciate it. And guys, if you do enjoy content like this one, do like Justin did. Super chats go a long way. Hitting the like button, subscribing. Of course, Stochastic 15% off. Solver discount as well. No discount, but you give me an affiliate credit, which is good for me. Maybe not as good for you. But you don't get any discounts on anything with the Solver. They don't give discounts. It's a strategy. It's a strategy that's working for them, I guess. But check it out. Links in the description. Underdog, $1,000 in bonus cash. And now your 3 takeaways. So number 1 would be fading one of Geno and Brock Purdy. We just showed what that would look like. That's one way to get away from the pack and get away from projections right away. Number 2 would be more onslaughts. 5-1s not occurring for either side. Niners going to play angry. Seahawks, maybe not as good of a team as we thought, given the fact they couldn't beat the Giants. So I would say for that one, 5-1 builds, a little more on the menu, just because of the fact they don't come up naturally at all. When they come up naturally, you don't want to play them. When they don't come up naturally, it's when you want to play them a little bit more. So especially if you're 150 maxing anything, the mini max tonight, big tournament, if you have the money to do that, try to get in some 5-1 builds no matter what you're doing. Number 3 way to get unique would be, I guess, straight away, if you're using stochastic data, not play Matthew Wright. It doesn't seem like the solver was quite as Matthew Wright obsessed, so it might not be an industry-wide thing, but with the low ownership projected for Wright and the fact that Jake Moody's had a good role kicking, and I have to assume based on the data, I think stochastic probably views kickers as like one-to-one replacements, because normally they are. I know from Football Outsiders that was a thing where historically kickers, you rotate them in, some guys will be better than not, and basically the role will shift if that guy's not as good. But again, the assumption is that Matthew Wright gets a Jake Moody role. The Jake Moody role is pretty valuable. So if you had a season-long league, I'd probably pick up Matthew Wright. If you don't like, you just need a kicker this week. He projects well. He's taken over a good role. He's a good play, but if you don't play him according to stochastic data, you're probably gonna get different. So playing your Jason Myers more, that might be the way to do that, at least to beat the stochastic people, if not everybody else in the field out there. I appreciate all you guys watching. Again, hit that like button and subscribe down below. Follow me at Chris Spags. Follow the show at Splash Play Pod. Back tomorrow doing a similar process for the main slate. And of course, I'll do it again on Sunday at 9 a.m. And Splash Play here. Videos Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 11 a.m. Talking about the slates, talking about best ball on Tuesdays. It's what I do here. So shout out to all you fine folks who've joined down below. Support the channel. Get my data and a premium video tomorrow where I go game by game, looking at all the advanced analytics, trying to find little advantages for you guys. And every week I find a few that end up paying off big time. So that's what we have tomorrow. Hit the join button for $4.99. Supports the show, supports me doing this as a labor of love right now that I prefer to be just a labor instead of a labor of love. We'll be back tomorrow with more, guys. I'll see you guys then. Enjoy your days. And of course, good luck. Bye-bye.